Mahaparinirvan Divas, commemorating the death anniversary of Baba Saheb. This year marks the 69th death anniversary of the revered leader, thinker and reformer who dedicated his life to championing equality and eradicating caste-based discrimination. As a tribute to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's transformative legacy, Mahaparinirvan Divas holds profound significance. As per Buddhist texts, Lord Buddha's death is considered to be Mahaparinirvan, the Sanskrit term for nirvana after death. Parinirvan is considered liberation from samar, karma and the cycle of death and birth. It is the most sacrosanct day in the Buddhist calendar. To Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the social reformer, Buddha lay very close in terms of his ideology and thoughts. Baba Saheb was regarded as a Buddhist guru because of his great influence in India to eradicate the social scourge of untouchability. Dr. Ambedkar's admirers and followers believe he was as influential as Lord Buddha, which is why his death anniversary is celebrated as Mahaparinirvan Divas. As we pay homage to him by reflecting on his teachings and commitment to building a just and inclusive society, let's look back at the transformative legacy of Baba Saheb and how we're carrying it forward. In fact, how we are carrying forward his vision of a just and inclusive world. For this, joining me are two distinguished guests in the studio. I'm pleased to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Akash Patil. He's Director, Dr. Ambedkar International Center, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Colonel, thank you for your time. Welcome to Sunset TV. Next to him is Dr. Renu Keer. She's Associate Professor, ARSD College, Delhi University. Dr. Keer, glad to have you with us on Sunset TV as well. In fact, allow me to begin the program today with you. It's an important day. We mark 69 years since Baba Saheb left India. But his legacy is something that remains unparalleled in Indian history. Talk to us and our viewers about some of his biggest contributions that are helping us deal with some of the contemporary challenges as well.
Tina ji, as you said, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar had a very transformative legacy. He was not just a leader of untouchables or the depressed class. In fact, he was a national statesman. He was the man who did not only work for a casteless society, for an egalitarian society or for a social justice cause, but he was a man who actually worked for the emancipation, for the liberation of all these sections of our society, be it the untouchables, the women, the minorities, every section he touched upon through his writings and of course through his struggle, beginning from 1970 onwards when he completed his studies from Columbia University and then London School of Economics, and the first untouchable who actually gained the highest degrees from the foreign universities and the most prestigious universities in the world. When he came back, he witnessed the same sort of caste-based discrimination, even though he was highly educated and the most educated person of then and even now. Right. Yet he faced so much discrimination, and his book, his writing, Waiting for a Visa, he has mentioned the incidents where he personally went through that sort of discrimination. And one of the important incidents when he came back and joined the Ministry of Gaikwad, and was working there as a finance officer, and the PN over there was not ready, was not willing to offer him water, and that made him crying. Again, when he was looking for a house, a place where he could stay for a day or so, he had to stay in a Parsi dharamshala, and he had to hide his Mahar identity, and that reflects the kind of peak we had, the caste-based discrimination, and that made him realize that how this caste-based injustice was affecting the larger section of Indian society, particularly the Hindu society. And this is where he started his struggle, not only through his writing, but on ground as well. The Mahar Satyagraha of 1927, where he, along with his followers, tried to get water from a public place. Then in 1930, the Kalaram temple entrance movement, where he wanted to be part of same Hindu religion, because he believed that the untouchables, the Shudras, were the part of same Hindu society but were not being allowed to participate. So for a very long time he tried to eradicate, to improve the society, but when he could not.
Perhaps that's the scouts that he continued to fight against despite the odds. He, the contributions, Colonel, that he made towards building India is something that we are talking about even today. Most of us only know about the fact that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the chief architect of the Indian Constitution, but the fact that his ideas, his thoughts are relevant even today in the contemporary times. They are helping India become a strong and a mature democracy, dealing with a lot of contemporary challenges. The question here is, today is the day when we are reflecting on his teachings and how we can carry his vision forward. As director at the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar International Center, tell us about how you're taking forward his ideas, his philosophy, because he clearly was not just revered and respected in India, his thoughts resonated worldwide.
Absolutely. So now today we are celebrating the 75 years of Constitution, Samvidhan ka Amrit Mahotsav. We all know Baba Saheb is the chief architect of the Constitution, but as Dr. Renu also said, apart from Constitution, he is a multifaceted personality. Absolutely. He contributed in setting up of RBI. He was responsible for Central Water Management Authority. So our charter of Dr. Ambedkar International Center is to take his vision global. We are working on socio-economic transformation studies and the Buddhist studies. On these two verticals we are working. Okay. Coming to your question of the contemporary relevance of Dr. Ambedkar. Now look at the vision of Dr. Ambedkar. We observed the Constitution Day celebrations right from 26 November we have started. You see, there are many countries, they had their constitution, but not all of them they could succeed for 17 to 18 years. And we in Bharat are celebrating Amrit Mahotsav of Constitution, which will definitely take us to the Viksit Bharat, which our government is aiming for 2047. So look at the vision of such a great personality. He could pen it down, and that is how it is said that the Constitution which he framed, it's not just a document, but it's a guiding path for all of us, for as a nation. We are such a diverse nation. He could think of all that. Now, as Dr. Renu brought out, his personal life, so many difficulties he faced through. But when he worked for drafting the Constitution, there was only one thing in his mind, nation first, which we see, and that is what we are celebrating. So his contribution is immense. We can take it out, the young generation, they should actually follow him in all his ideals, in his studies, the way he went abroad. He took education as the means for developing himself and the society also. Those are the ideals which we should look forward to.
Sure, we'll talk about some of the teachings and the learnings that the current generation can take from Baba Saheb's life. But a related question about some of the initiatives and how we are propagating his ideas to the world. Tell us about some of the initiatives through which you're connecting with the people of India, of the world, and especially the youth.
Right. So at Dr. Ambedkar International Center, we are a convention center. We organize a lot of workshops, seminars, panel discussions on all the related fields, not only socio-economic transformation fields, but SDG goals, livelihood, policy making, think tank. We are trying to develop a database. Research activities are supposed to be there. We also have Dr. Ambedkar National Memorial, which is looked after by Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Now, we have not just kept it as a memorial or a museum where one can see the life and work of Dr. Ambedkar, but we have made it as a initiative where the tagline is learning beyond classroom. So we invite the schools there and we ask the teachers and the principal to conduct the classes on Constitution or history at our place. So that becomes a platform for students to learn. The national education policy says that experiential learning should be promoted for the students. So that is the place. Now imagine a student who comes to the Mahaparinirvan site of Dr. Ambedkar. He gets motivated not only by the technology which is available in the museum to see life and work of Dr. Ambedkar, but he gets to see that yes, he had worked here somewhere, and we have the Constitution Museum there.
Absolutely. So, you know, Dr. Keer, here we are talking about a man who was chairman of the drafting commission as chief architect of the Indian Constitution. He gave us a document which is a living document, which is called a living document, a guiding light, and which continues to evolve with changing times. And he led a life with a thought that can even inspire the current generations and the generations beyond. Tell us about some of the learnings that his life left for the current and the future generations, something in particular that perhaps the younger generation can imbibe from the kind of life and struggle that Baba Saheb faced during his times.
Definitely. See, the kind of life he had and the kind of contribution he made and the kind of philosophy he had, especially in terms of making the Constitution of India. And while speaking in the Constituent Assembly in November 1949, he quite clearly said that we are Indian first and last. And when it comes to caste identity, right, and when it comes to the unity, integrity and sovereignty of India, we have to think above the caste system. And considering the kind of stress and difficulties he went through during his initial life, even the later part also, the young generation need to know how to manage their stress, how to manage their struggle and never lose their hope. Always they need to work towards their goal. Right? And I would definitely like to mention here his contribution towards the emancipation and the liberation of Indian women, and it would not be an exaggeration to call him the first feminist of India, because he is the person, he is the man who quite scientifically examined all the subjects and particularly the issues of women. And here the comparison between the strongest democracy, which is America, it attained its independence in 1776 and women over there received their voting rights in 1920. Again, the oldest democracy, that is the Great Britain democracy, and it is known as the mother of democracy. So democracy was adopted in 1688, right? And women could attain their voting right in 1928. And in India, with the very first day of the adoption and the enforcement of the Constitution of India, Indian women were given all the equal rights as compared to the male counterpart. And not only the fundamental rights, their maternity. Ambedkar is the man who even prior to independence of India spoke for the maternity rights of women. And when actually the in the Constituent Assembly, when Rajkumari Amrita Kaur, who was representing the females, she was not in favor of providing Indian women their voting rights. She suggesting the idea that let them educate first, let them learn how to practice their voting right. And it was Dr. Ambedkar who firmly stood in favor of providing Indian women all the equal rights along with the voting right. And that is something which make him different, which makes him different in many ways. And his devotion towards females emancipation, their liberation.
You're right. It was perhaps his far-sightedness, Colonel Patil, that made India into a progressive society on a lot of issues. And one that Professor Renu cited was women emancipation. There are several other rights that the Indian Constitution provides to different sections of the society, which if we compare globally to other countries, have not been given naturally to the citizens. They've had to fight for reclaiming that right, which our Constitution gave it immediately to all our citizens. The question here is, can his teachings, and now because just like the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, we are talking about Dr. Ambedkar also being a global icon, in the context of the global geopolitics and in the context of these nations which do not treat all their citizens equally, do you think Baba Saheb's teachings could become one of the huge sources and they have the potential to bring about social changes, the kind that it brought in India?
See, all the subjects which Baba Saheb touched, whether it be labor laws, women empowerment, these are not a country specific, but they have a universal appeal.
Right.
So anywhere where we go and speak about Dr. Ambedkar at the global level, women empowerment, that is one issue. His role for the development of the youth through education, that is one most important issue which affects the complete all the states. When Bharat is trying to take the leadership in global south, and when we are developing towards Viksit Bharat, yes, these are some takeaways from Dr. Ambedkar's life, that using education as the tool, the primary tool for the development. As he also laid stress upon using constitutional means for taking freedom. So now we see lot of, there are, whether it is Middle East or whether it is, Russia, Ukraine, where the political conditions are not, the nations are at struggle with each other.
Right.
So these teachings of Dr. Ambedkar, with his emphasis on Buddhism, so that makes lot of relevance.
Okay, Dr. Kher, I'll try and understand in a similar context from you. Looking at the current global scenario, also looking at the fact that India aspires to become a developed nation by 2047, and as we progress towards becoming a Viksit Bharat, and if we try and analyze, have we been able to live up to the expectations of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in terms of what he wanted to propagate for us as a socio-economic and just and equitable society?
Of course, Dr. Ambedkar visualized Constitution as a transformative instrument, right? And the way Indian Constitution has been executed in last 70 or 75 years, that reflects the kind of progress we have achieved in last 75 years. And as Mr. Patil said, that many democracies or countries which attained their independence with us couldn't make their existence. So one of the achievements of us is that we are still there and we are emerging, not only in an as a global power in economic terms, but as a soft power as well. In many ways, we can see India's emergence, India's voice at global scale, at global level, and the kind of society Ambedkar visualized. In many ways, if we look at the eradication of triple talaq, that is one example. Although in the beginning, Dr. Ambedkar was very much in favor of uniform civil code, but due to various domestic political reasons, that particular provision could not be a part of our constitution. Again, then Dr. Ambedkar advocated for Hindu code bill, and again for some various religious domestic reasons and particularly the political ones, that bill also could not be enforced and adopted in the constitution. But gradually and recently, the way the government has in certain ways adopted and enforced those particular visions and ideas and the philosophy of Dr. Ambedkar clearly reflects that we are progressing in that direction. One important thing which Dr. Ambedkar said in Constituent Assembly, that making a constitution is an easy task, but running a constitution is a difficult one. And we have been running our society, our state, our nation through constitution. That reflects our biggest achievement in last 75 years. So yes, and of course there is a lot to achieve. there is a lot to achieve in terms of education, because still a large section of our society, especially the downtrodden economically, do not have access to education, although we have fundamental right to education. But still we see children on state that they are not getting the primary education.
Although a lot of efforts have been made, through various policies of the government, we must not forget we are the world's largest population now, and a more diverse one with different kinds of beliefs to follow as well. So a challenging task, but nevertheless, we are gradually reaching up to our goal, which is of becoming a Viksit Bharat. Colonel Patil, as we pay tribute to Baba Saheb Ambedkar on his 69th death anniversary, and we reflect on his teachings, we are talking about the significance of passing on his legacy to the next generation. The question here is, it should be a collective responsibility. It can't be left to a particular organization, a particular stakeholder to do that job, and especially in context of us walking towards, or maybe moving towards achieving the goal of Viksit Bharat. Tell us about the role every stakeholder can play collectively to do that job, to pass on the legacy, the unparalleled legacy of Baba Saheb, which will eventually help us achieve this goal of becoming a Viksit Bharat.
When we look at the life of Dr. Ambedkar, the major contribution was from his teachers. So when we are talking about the collective responsibility, I believe that it is the task of our teaching fraternity. The students, of course, they have to imbibe his values, but the teaching fraternity, the teachers, they should be the role models for our next generation. That is number one. We need to develop our institutes. Dr. Ambedkar, he went outside to take his education. When we are aiming for Viksit Bharat, our educational institutes, various other places of importance, that should be developed in our own country. Lastly, I would also like to say the role of society, various organizations which are following the path of Dr. Ambedkar. So they have to give the right perspective and portray his contributions as an economist, as an educator, as a lawyer. So he was a multifaceted personality. Those all things, if we give to our next generation, I am sure it would definitely lead us to the Viksit Bharat.
Right. So as someone who made multifaceted contributions towards nation building, Baba Saheb Ambedkar's legacy remains unparalleled. The important aspect here that both our guests are highlighting is that his legacy needs to be passed on to the next generation. His vision of a just, equitable and inclusive society is something that we have to achieve collectively. With that, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you once again to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.